Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today I am here. Special guest. We have varsity news reporter Maeve Ellis, fourth year econ and history student. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. So out of the 69 departments / I guess academic units, because sometimes they have weird names, statistics is ranked the worst by course evaluations, and the department does have the reputation for being bad at U of T. Yeah, it's interesting that we actually have hard data to back this. U of T knew in the summer before the school year that these voyeurism reports happened, but they didn't tell students about it until after they moved into the residence in September. The budget was somewhere around $50,000 for Victoria College clubs, and about half of the money allocated to clubs just did not get spent. I think it is roughly $10 million, the UTSU budget. These are large sums of money that they could do a lot of stuff with. They can choose which club gets $20,000, which frosh event do we cancel. I feel there's just so much people don't know about it, and it's just such a powerful organization for how little people care about it. It's a really weird dynamic on Reddit, one that I'm still not used to, where it's I'm the only non-anonymous account. My Reddit account says Maeve Ellis on it, Maeve Ellis, Toronto journalist, and links to all my other accounts. I just want to ask, do you ever get nervous as someone who's so earlier in their career, or just a young person, having your face associated with so many interview guests with so many opinions?
No, I don't think so at all. I think a conversation is always useful.
I don't know if you're public about this yet or not, but I'm just wondering, after you graduate here, are you going to continue with VoV, or do a different podcast where you're not, you won't be interviewing students, but just
I won't be interviewing students. Yeah. I'm in the midst of figuring that out.
That's
do you have any
exciting.
suggestions? What do you think we should do? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the VoV podcast, Voices of Vic. Today I am here. Special guest. We have varsity news reporter, managing online editor would be your official title. Is that right?
Yeah.
Maeve Ellis, fourth year econ and history student. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Another student in journalism, if you call this journalism. This is a little bit more casual, laid back. We don't do the same, I guess, degree of professional work that you do at the varsity, but it's an honor to have you on.
No, thanks. And no, I think this podcast, it's so impressive how you can just be so organized to just regularly put out interviews with students and have all this equipment. And yeah, I have a lot of admiration for just your drive to continue producing such U of T centric stuff.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So we're both in fourth year. So this is going to be kind of a period where who knows what's going to happen with the podcast after I graduate, because it'd be kind of weird interviewing U of T students when I'm not a U of T myself, but we'll see. We'll make something happen. I want to open up. First, normally when there's a double major student, I have to ask, which program do you have more affinity with, econ or history? What kind of got you into those things? And do you have a favorite?
Sure, yeah. Well, I chose my majors for my program of for my eventual career of journalism, in that I wanted to learn skills that would help with it, and I just in general wanted majors that would just teach me more about the world. History is great just for studying any country, any time period, to get that context, and econ is really helpful for learning statistics skills and just learning some more specific concepts that are not too intuitive. And yeah, a lot of people in journalism, they actually do a journalism degree itself, a journalism major. And a lot of people ask me why I didn't do that, but I wanted to learn actual real world topics, I think, when I was in university, rather than something that was super specific to one career.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. Because maybe even for you, I don't know if it's the case, maybe you've heard it from people around you, or maybe your parents have told you this, but if you have perhaps a natural talent for journalism, you might not need to go and study it as much as perhaps someone who wants to get into it but might not know exactly the ins and outs of how to write or how to tell a story or this kind of thing. So from at least the articles I've read of yours just preparing for this podcast, it seems like you're a natural, even though you're not studying journalism.
Oh, thanks. It's really kind. And yeah, no, I think a lot of journalism too is just stuff you can learn on the job, or stuff you can learn just by doing it. I'm sure you've learned so much about getting cool interview subjects and filming equipment and all that just from this podcast. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I feel the same from just spending so many hours a week doing articles and doing side projects for journalism.
100%. So the main article of discussion today, maybe we'll just open up right away with it. This came out on February 6th, I believe. Student course evaluations rank statistics department lowest, small humanities centers highest. So this is I would guess you'd call it a report that you co-authored. Is that right?
Yeah, I read it with someone else, and my co-author, he did like the actual like computer science web scraping to like get like all this data on student course evaluations. So, when you like fill those out at the end of every semester.
Yep.
Yeah, so we got the data on 40,000 classes that the arts and science department has put on in the last like decade at U of T, which is so exciting.
That's awesome. And statistics, I'm taking a statistics minor.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
I might be able to speak firsthand, but that out of all these courses or all these departments, I guess, ranked the lowest.
Yeah, so out of like the 69 like departments / I guess academic units, because sometimes they have weird names. Statistics is ranked the worst by course evaluations, and I thought that was so interesting because like the department does have the reputation for being bad at U of T. Like I feel like I just hear that on r/U of T and just from like people in the program randomly. So yeah, it's interesting that we actually have like hard data to like back this.
Absolutely. So what sparked the idea to even look into this? This is because I think a lot of students, it obviously generates some discussion. We're going to be talking about it right now. And the idea that you have a statistical evidence that stats is actually the toughest, worst one according to students. It's hard to, necessarily pin down what makes it the worst. Why are they evaluating in this way? But you laid out in the article how you operationalized, I guess, the score of the department. Maybe if you want to tell the people how you figured that out.
Yeah, sure. We wanted to be like as specific as possible in the article because like a lot of people will be like, questioning our data or like wondering how we got that conclusion. But so like on course evaluations, you rank courses on like 8 or so different metrics. And what we did was we just like averaged out all those metrics. Like it's things like instructor generated enthusiasm or assignments contributed to my learning or just like I learned a lot from this course. And we just basically averaged out all those metrics to be like as neutral as possible. And just across all the departments in the statistics courses, it ranks the lowest. It's something like 3.7 out of 9 is like the ranking on average those courses got in the last school year.
That's unreal because like another reason that they did pin down was the size of the department has also really grown in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Like I don't even remember the exact numbers, but I think that is also a big issue with university in general, whether it's a stats department or anything else. The less personal education is, like the less you need, like it's good to have a relationship with your teacher. It actually engages you more, and it actually, I think, helps learning, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it was like these tiny humanities departments that did the best, probably because like there are these super small class sizes a lot of the time. And like there's like you see the same people in every classes, have multiple classes with the same professor. So I think people do just like the idea of like, that kind of one-on-one attention. Yep. And actually within like the math department, which did second worst, it was actually those like upper year courses that actually were ranked pretty well. So it's even like when those class sizes get a lot smaller and when the professors are more passionate and when it's more specialized, and people in general just enjoy those courses more than like, like a MAT 135 lecture hall of like 2,000 students.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very interesting. And I was going to ask something. No worries. I'll get back to it.
Yeah, I asked a lot of students about that, and I think a general idea that people had was that like people take a lot of math courses and stats courses just like not because they actually are interested in the material, but like pretty much just because like they need it as a prerequisite for like a life sci degree. Yeah.
Sorry, that's exactly what it was.
Sorry, yeah, that's fine.
I remember what I was gonna say. So I think that in the short term, or at least when we're doing these course evaluations, because it's like right by the end of the course that they ask you to kind of fill these things out. It's very, I guess, it's evaluating the immediate experience of how you felt in that course. I think what would also be interesting is to see how have these courses served their students in the long term. So even if statistics perhaps is right now ranked the worst department, maybe it sets up their students for more prosperous careers ahead of, in the future, versus the humanities where a lot of the students are enjoying their time now, but maybe it's not, putting the right pressure on them to really have that strong career success once they graduate out of U of T. Do you think that could be possible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that would be pretty interesting, like some kind of data set that's looking at like alumni at U of T. Yeah. I can say for myself, I've taken Eco 220, which is econometrics. So it's economics department, which was ranked 6th worst at U of T.
Okay.
I think that's one of your majors, right?
That is my main major. Yeah.
Okay, exactly. Yeah. So anyways, Eco 220, I find it a difficult course, and, I would have some complaints about it. But then I know when I had an internship the next summer, I had to use like so many of those skills in that, like, pivot charts, Excel tables. knowing how to like, read these like statistical terms. So yeah, even just having like a bit of like a fresh head after you've like gotten over the frustration of a course, like maybe people would see it a little bit differently.
Absolutely. Where was history ranked? Do you know where history was ranked?
Oh, I don't remember. I think it was something in like the 20s or 30s.
Okay,
it did a lot better.
Not as bad.
Yeah, I think, it's so interesting in those departments because people like really, like you're only signed up for a history course probably because you enjoy that history, right?
Makes
like
sense.
It won't directly lead to a job like, Rotman might. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. So we're going to stay on that. We have a few other articles though of yours that I am interested in hearing about. And one of them that got you on CP24, I watched a little interview clip, was the voyeurism cases that happened last year. And that was a big deal. That was like going around U of T. We did a joke post. This is a thing. We didn't really take it as professionally as you did. You're out here actually protecting students because U of T was a little bit hush on that, or maybe didn't want it to, get out into the community or the news and ruin the reputation of the school, I would say. But I think you did a good job of raising awareness.
Thank you. Yeah, that was so interesting to report on because it's just like nobody had any idea of like exactly how many cases there were or like how many reports there were. Right. And it was almost like the school was telling different students different things. So like a lot of the so this was happening like in New College in the Wilson Hall residence building in particular. And it was really scary for students because U of T knew in the summer before the school year that these voyeurism reports happened, but they didn't tell students about it until after they moved into the residence in September. I know. And then from then on, like when there were more cases in New College, a lot of the time they would, or a couple of times at least, they would only tell residents of the building and not tell people taking classes in the building or not tell the broader community. So yeah, it made it kind of just like such a weird atmosphere. And and it's not even entirely, it's like U of T's fault, of course. So it didn't really make sense why they were so secretive about this whole thing.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't even students. That's the thing. We thought like originally I thought it might have been a student, like U of T student, but I don't think it was, right?
Yeah, I'll have to like, maybe I should go back and check, but I think at least the first couple suspects were like random old men from out of town. And then I think the third time it actually was an international student that they
there's
arrested.
a third time.
Yeah, there was multiple times and then multiple like suspects who did it. Yeah, I think at least one time a student was suspected of doing it, but at least the first couple times it was just like older men who were like on campus, like going into girls' bathrooms, which is just so like horrifying.
No, that's awful. Sorry, you can squeeze by here. We'll cut this out. All good. But yeah, no, that's terrible. Do you think that U of T, like other than just these voyeurism cases, do you think that their transparency is up to par with what you'd want it to be for the school?
I don't think so. I think it's really interesting reporting on it for multiple years as a student journalist, just because it's just like such a huge Goliath organization. It's like endowments of billions of dollars and just like tens of thousands of employees. But like there's just such little we know about like its internal finances, how it operates and all these things. And and just like I think voyeurism is just like one example of just like stuff that goes on campus that we don't know more details of.
Absolutely.
It's interesting with like, with the course evaluation data too. Like it's there, it's online, but it's just like so hard for students to like actually study and look at. So there's just like all this information U of T has that it just like for whatever reason like opts not to share with like the broader public. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I guess one of the other things I've heard about it, this was from a guy who's running for something in UTSU. I don't remember exactly what position, but he was interested in knowing why finals grades don't get released. And he was trying to push or campaign for U of T to release finals grades, but I don't think that they will because of this transparency thing. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with that. I don't know. Maybe it's just like curves. They don't want to show the classes or the students like how they curve certain courses.
Right.
I know that I've obviously heard of curving up, but I don't know if the university has ever admitted to curving down. Is that a thing? Do you think that's a thing? Or
I feel like I've seen it online. Like people will like attach a screenshot of like a Quirkus announcement like, oh, hey, we're curving down everything by 2% or something. But I feel like professors would much more readily admit to curving up just because that's like positive news for students.
Absolutely.
That's interesting about the final grades though. Like I don't think they even release final marks though anywhere.
No.
Like not exams or finals. I think there's like some initiatives like on Reddit for people to like have a spreadsheet and like fill out the final grades like that Acorn gets for classes. But yeah, I don't really see a reason why that can't be like totally public. That's just a broader thing too in Canada and like public institutions versus like America.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like in other like Western countries, but just in general, like in journalism, people call it like it's private until you can prove it should be public.
Right.
Whereas in America, like information is public until you prove it should be private.
Right.
So like, you know, us journalists in Canada, it's just like you have to jump through a lot more hoops to get like information from the data from the government that's like, you know, not even that nefarious or that critical, just
Absolutely.
like general information that would be cool to know.
Why do you think that the Canadian culture is more private in that sense? Like, what's the difference? Because we share a lot of similarities on a global stage with the U.S., but that is definitely something I've heard about before, where the U.S., like a lot of the stuff is just public records, open book, whereas here, for some reason, we're a little bit, you know, try to keep it closer to the chest.
I've wondered about that, but I actually don't know the answer. Like, I've also tried to like figure out any like history reasons and stuff. I don't know if it's something to do with like their free speech laws or just like a general culture of like maybe being less trusting of the government down there, whereas like we just have more faith in general in like our public sector. It's come up a lot though. Like, do you know what like freedom of information requests are?
No.
Okay, it's like when you like a journalist or like any member of the public, you could just like file for this kind of like information from like UofT or other public institutions, and they'll get back to you and they usually charge some money to like process it.
Yep.
And normally it would be like a reasonable amount, like $20 or like $100 if it's a lot. But a lot of the time in journalism, like you'll get back, it'll be like $2,000 or like it'll take like years to process and that kind of thing. So it's quite hard as like a journalist, like covering UofT or just like public institutions in general here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely as a journalist, that would be a challenge. I'm interested in knowing, I guess, how your perspective on U of T or the campus in general has evolved since your first year, because you've been involved with the varsity for your entire university career. Is that right?
Yeah.
So when you first got here, or maybe even before that, what were your expectations of U of T? What were your first impressions? Even maybe with the paper, like what did you get involved with in your first year? And now that you've kind of done the entire experience, how has that changed?
I think one thing that surprises me about U of T, and I guess this isn't necessarily like a bad thing, but it's just like so much less centralized than I thought it was before. And I feel like it's just like so complicated with just like 7 different colleges, so many different like departments to teach things, like types of departments, types of like faculty that like research things or teach things or have like public speeches and just like how things like fit into one another. Like the Monk School, for instance, it's like an undergrad program and grad school program and does research and does public talks and just like all these things. So I don't know if it's just like my skill set, but just like as a student journalist, I just like find it hard to wrap my head around sometimes. But it's just like, it's such an interesting like behemoth of an institution that, you know, overall just like it provides so much good, like does so much research and teaches like hundreds of thousands of people. But it's just like, it's so interesting. It was just like so sprawling. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any friends who've perhaps gone to universities still in Ontario, like not that the culture in terms of, let's say if you're an international student would shift. Like if you're coming from China, obviously it's a much different culture when you arrive here in Canada. But even as a student here, I know that my cousin, she obviously grew up in Canada, went to high school in Canada, but then has gone to the States for university. So a lot of talk for just trying to ask.
No.
You had friends, I'm thinking, likely, who went to universities still in Ontario, but not as massive as the University of Toronto. How do you think that, if you've spoken with them at all, that the experience would be for some of these smaller, more centralized, more communal, I'd even say, universities are? Like, how is their experience compared to yours here, where it's kind of, you can't really, keep track of everything?
Yeah, like I don't know if you have friends who go to like Queen's, for instance, but like a lot of people from my high school went there, and it's interesting to see. Like I feel like it is like a lot more smaller and close knit. I don't know exactly how big it is, but it's like I know it just like has so many like financial problems, for instance, with like the tuition freezes and all these other changes. So like U of T is kind of giant and everything, but for some reason it is just like so prosperous and able to provide a lot of programs. Like even if they don't spend money on students, at least like they have the money in the first place. But I mean, it would be interesting to be in a program like a humanities one at Queen's and it just like gets cut out entirely, like they're kind of doing now, or I have friends, not from high school, but current friends who are like at York. And I know that's like an issue there too. They're just like slashing so many programs. And I don't know why specifically some schools are struggling so much compared to like others like U of T, but it's interesting how like it just seems so innocuous what university you choose in high school. Like I personally didn't put too much thought into it, but then but then things can just like change so entirely once you're there. Like your whole program can get totally cut, or you know, the university itself can like shut down or something.
That's actually an interesting point. I never even thought about that, because that's also happening. My brother goes to Sheridan. He's learning to be he's learning electrical, so to be an electrician, going to the trades, and same thing. Like they're slashing a lot of stuff. They're slashing a lot of their international student, I guess, slots or available positions that they allow for international students, which is something that I know that you've written about, you've covered, is the housing crisis, and how not too long ago we saw, at least I watched a video of Justin Trudeau go on and talk about immigration and what's happening with housing, why the prices are so inflated. And the main point that he made was international students, how there are universities who are taking advantage of the system and they're bringing in students that we can't really house, blah, blah, blah. In your article, which I think you probably have a good point about, I don't think it's necessarily the international students that are causing this issue. I think that in that video, perhaps the government now is trying to shift the blame because they realize they kind of messed up on the immigration policy, because international students, I feel like, have never really caused issue with housing availability in this country. I was pretty surprised, though, to see that how big the international student population is. It's like 1 in every 48 people in Canada, I read in that article.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, when I've talked to, like, international students themselves, like, they're like, yeah, like, they'll be like, well, we do just, like, need somewhere to live, and just, like, like, the fact that you need a bed to sleep on and, like, a kitchen to cook in, you know, it's no one's fault, but, like, you know, I think everyone agrees that obviously when you have, like, you know, an increase of people, like, needing to stay here, like, we do need to accommodate that by just, like, having more housing for people to stay in, or, you know, other measures, like more public housing, more student residences, that kind of thing as well. But yeah, I know it is a really sad case where people, like, you know, come to university in Canada or like a college or something in the hopes of moving here, and then they're just hit with like having to spend so much for just like such horrible places to live. It's like it's a pretty bad system where like we can't guarantee that for the people like who are just sacrificing so much to come here.
100%.
Like I think international tuition is something like $60,000 a year, and you know, you're like signing up for like 4 years here, and then there's just like all these issues that come with that.
100%. Absolutely. And yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's just perfect sense. You're an econ student, you know, when you have too many people and you don't have the supply, right? You have all the demand but no supply, you're going to cause a lot of issues, and obviously that's why we're in the mess that we're in now. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see the direction that Canada heads in after this next election. But who knows? Something that you consider time to time. I know that I don't know how much research or how much you look into U of T's Reddit page, but how much of a sense do you think that you can get from like where's the best source for university culture? Because sometimes, you know, we look to these clubs or organizations, whether it's a paper like the Varsity, whether it's, who knows, a certain student levy, and maybe they capture some parts of the university, maybe they don't capture some little niche aspects of the culture, because some of the stuff that people can post about on Reddit are obviously too inappropriate to talk about on an official university platform. So where as a journalist do you go to really get a real grasp of I guess the student sentiment at the school?
That's such an interesting question. Yeah, because I feel like U of T is just like such an entirely different place. If you go on a Reddit page about it, or like, you know, professors tweeting about it, or like, or, you know, this podcast or the Varsity homepage and just everything like that. And one of the first journalism pieces I wrote in first year was about r/U of T and trying to answer the question, like, why is it so depressing? Why is it such like a cesspool? And like, why are people... like I remember when I first signed up to come to U of T, one of the first things me and my sister did was we looked at the subreddit about the school, and it was just like terrifying. And like, oh my God, was this a horrible decision? But I guess with that being said, like you've talked about, like it is a completely anonymous space online. So people are able to say things that they wouldn't be comfortable saying, you know, in like a student council meeting or like to their friends or on their Instagram story or that kind of thing. So I feel like we get a lot more honesty on there. As a student journalist, I feel like people have just been so hesitant in general to speak out against departments. I feel like you speak out about your departments a bit, but most students are not.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But like, or like against like professors or just like these different issues they have at U of T. But then when you get there online, like people in general are just like so much more liberated to be honest about how they feel.
Yeah.
It's also so interesting. Like we just have these like meme pages too on Instagram with like tens of thousands of followers. U of T memes, I guess, is the main one.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just so interesting how just like so much of like school spirit and like, or not spirit, but just like school community and discourse is just like wrapped up in these pages run by like a tiny number of anonymous people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. And do you think that that's the thing, this is where I'm coming from, is like the most real version of university culture. Like even like U of T memes, great example. Another one is U of Tears. And these U of T, these are like these anonymous confessions that people make. And it's like part of the anonymity, it's good once again, like you said, because you know, people are a little bit more honest. There's all these barriers that maybe they don't want to put their name to what they say. But then it also comes with a flip side where it's like there's no accountability. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and we don't even know what's real. Like there's some crazy stuff on these pages that people are just out there saying, and it's like, is that true? I don't know if I want to necessarily believe what you're saying, because if you're not really willing to put your name to it, you could talk about anything you want. And that's what I think is respectable about the kind of work that you do, is when you are working on a piece or when you want to make a certain point, you can't necessarily, I don't know, maybe you can, but I know that on your pieces, you have to type your name.
No, yeah,
Maeve
everyone
Ellis.
does, yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it keeps you accountable, and it keeps you honest with yourself even. So have you ever struggled perhaps with wanting to write about a certain topic or a subject in the paper, but you felt too uncomfortable to do so because you didn't want to necessarily attach your name to this specific idea, or you were afraid of the reaction of perhaps students or the community at large?
I can't really think of anything, just because I've done a lot of like news reporting, so it wouldn't really be like a big opinion piece with my name on it. But like one thing on that topic though that I wonder about is I feel like I see a lot of like activism on campus or people with opinions, but people still want to be anonymous. Like they'll still you know, want us to take a picture of their event like with just like, you know, behind their head, not with their face on it, or they'll ask us to blur out their faces or not have their names attached to something. And I mean, it's hard because we're all students, we're all very young, and we don't know if there's going to be like professional ramifications later on. But I feel like it just like it lends a lot less credence to your opinion when like you're not going to attach your full government name to your opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a good point. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, let the cameras cool down, and we can jump right back into it.
Okay, great.
All right. Back from a short break. Back at it, ladies and gentlemen, here with Maeve Ellis. Also wanted to mention that you were a finalist for the Canadian University Press's 2023 Investigative Journalism Award, because you did an article about U of T's, I guess, ethics around the manufacturing of their merchandise items, which is a pretty interesting article. I didn't even hear about this. There was like a big protest or encampment in the office of the president back in 2000. That's wild. But we'll circle back on that, because I, once again, never heard about that story. But right now, when is the UTSU election?
It's on Friday. Voting closes at, I think, 5 p.m. or midnight in 2 days. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but just for you.
So this, unfortunately, will be out after the election's already passed. I don't know if we'll know the results already by then. But UTSU election, as of this recording, is coming up. And there are 2 candidates.
Yeah, there's several positions, like 6 in total. And yeah, the presidential one has only 2 candidates. Absolutely. And some of them have like 4 or so candidates. So I think there's like 18 in total.
100%. And I've talked about UTSU a little bit on this podcast before. I did a video back, let's say 2 summers ago, where I looked at all the student fees that, you know, were on our invoice. So I broke those down. That was when it was, so I started this podcast in February of 2023. So I only had about 2 months to really get it off the ground, and then summer hit. So we did 13 episodes, and then to kind of stay relevant throughout the summer, I just made like these offhand random YouTube videos, right? Because I obviously couldn't have any podcast guests at U of T to record with throughout the summer. So once again, just to kind of keep the page up, did some random videos. One of the videos was going through the invoice and looking at all these different fees for clubs and levies, and a lot of them were UTSU related.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see the influence that the Students' Union has on the community, but I don't think anyone really pays attention. No one really cares. I know that at least back then, the voter turnout is like 10% or something. I don't know what it's going to be this year, but for you, from your reporting, what you've been looking at with the Students' Union election, or just interest in the Students' Union in the first place, how have you felt about UTSU? What can you tell the community or the students listening to this that they might not know that could be useful information?
Yeah, no, like you said, with like going through those fees, I feel like there's just like so much people don't know about it. And it's just like such a powerful organization for how little people like care about it.
Yeah.
We hosted a debate yesterday. We did like a live stream of having the candidates come in, and I think around half of the candidates just did not show up for the debate to like speak about their platform.
Jeez.
I know. Yeah. And we also, and then, yeah, like low turnout in like the audience there as well. And so it's just like an organization. I don't know how much the total fees is that it collects is from each student, but like, yeah, and like the dozens or the hundreds that we give over every year, but just like, a lot of students just who are not opting to like run in that election or to like, take the campaigning seriously.
Yeah.
And yeah, as for voter turnout, I think it was like 13% last year and like 11% the year before, something like that.
Yep.
And in context, like in government elections, it's like at least higher than like 50%, in Canadian elections. So yeah, it's just so interesting how there's like almost no one caring at all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is pinned against this thing that they actually do control. I would say, control or have influence on a lot. Like what does the UTSU do for students that don't know?
Like, it's really interesting how our, like the health insurance at U of T, like dental insurance and I think health insurance and like therapy, it's controlled by this like student organization. And like, it's a good initiative. Like, I guess it wouldn't be there if we didn't have like student unions who set that up in the first place. Right. But I don't know if you remember, there was talk in like September about like a change to like how they were covering therapy. But there was a lot of like outcry about like how there would be less coverage in total for students. And like there was something weird where they like reduced the coverage and then a lot of students opted out of getting it and then they raised it again, like once it was too late to sign up.
Interesting.
So just like things like that just like have such big tangible effects on student lives, but there's just like so little like caring or like voting or running for these positions too. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's something I think that at least my perspective on it was that, okay, these students, their top priority is their studies, right? Is the education, is why they're at U of T, is they're trying to get good grades, get their degree and learn something. And I was always under the assumption that there's no way that the administration, like the big bosses in charge, would actually give any sort of meaningful power to the student body. But I guess I was kind of wrong, because I also think that even like these college student governments, I know that you're a Victoria College student, is that right?
Yeah, I am.
And you used to write for The Strand, which was the Victoria College newspaper, and you talked about VUSAC. And VUSAC, which is, let's say, the UTSU of Victoria College, is they have also had problems with where they receive some funding and it's thousands of dollars, and it's like we all pay into it, but like where is it going? It doesn't really even get used a lot of the time. So it's like, how would you maybe shift the perspective? What is it going to take for students to want to pay more attention to these types of things? Or is there no way of doing it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah. And my specific article on that, it was that like the budget was somewhere around like $50,000 for Victoria College clubs, and about half of the money allocated to clubs just did not get spent. Like student
leaders. And when was this?
I guess it was 2 academic years ago. So like 2023 spring kind of. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I should have come on this podcast to talk about it if you just started it. But yeah, it's interesting. There's just like, so students have this money in the first place, like it's allocated and everything, it, you know, comes from Victoria College students. And then the club leaders just don't bother spending it, or like they're too busy with, you know, schoolwork or whatever to like get around to doing that. But it's interesting because U of T, we have like, you know, passionate activists in other areas. Like we have people in like, you know, organizations or doing protests or all this stuff. But then specifically like the student unions, just like it's kind of crickets a lot of the time for, you know, who's choosing to run, or, you know, people caring about who's going to vote for it. And it's interesting because like I feel like a lot of like these like bread and butter issues that students care about, like we talked about in the break, like CR and CR policies, or like, just like, you know, the stance that U of T as a school takes on issues. Like those are things that the UTSU is there to solve or is there to advocate about. But like students just don't make, like they'd rather talk about these issues online or talk about it with friends than actually go through like the advocacy organizations that are set up to address those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the concern that I've heard from students is that they believe that, like student government was in high school, it's basically just something to have on your resume. So, or for back then, if it's high school, your university application. I was president of student government for whatever high school, blah, blah, blah. And people are saying it's probably the same thing now. At least that's their belief. And it's because I was president of UTSU. That looks good on an application. That does help you stand out a little bit, I would say. But yeah, I think that if there was a candidate that wanted to run and really wanted to poke their head out of the woods and make a big, I don't want to say make a big scene, but you know, really show that they're not just doing it for themselves, not just doing it for a line on a resume, I think that it would get a lot of people interested. Because at least for like, I just made a fun little clip about this for VoV, and it was talking about how I did an episode with Rhonda McEwen, who's the Victoria College president, and that was when I realized that the student government actually does more than I thought it did. I thought it was just, you know, a bunch of kids having fun for a resume, but they actually have influence. They actually do stuff that matters, and they're in charge of a lot of funding. So when I realized that, once again, I talked about it on here. I made a little short clip talking about I should run for VUSAC as like a joke. Obviously I can't because I'm graduating, but people, you know, replied pretty positively. Obviously there was laughing because I wasn't being completely serious, but the idea that, you know, someone who wanted to put their name out there and say, I'm not afraid to say that what's going on right now is not functional, or that people are doing it for themselves, or that, you know, this could be run more efficiently. I think that when people start to see that authentic side of a campaign, they'd be more interested. So I think that, once again, I don't know these candidates personally, these two presidential candidates, but that's just my take. I think that, you know, it's the authenticity, and I think the student body just thinks that they're doing it for themselves.
Yeah, it's like, it's kind of a weird in between. I feel like university student unions, because it's like, you know, high school, I totally agree. Like it is just kind of keeners who are in there to like learn and, you know, get stuff for their resume. Whereas obviously, like, you know, the real government, like that's like actual issues and people caring. Whereas, we're kind of in a weird in between phase in university, because it's I think it is roughly $10 million, like the UTSU budget. The vast majority goes to like the insurance stuff, like health insurance and dental insurance. But like these are like large sums of money that they could do a lot of stuff with. Like they can choose which club gets $20,000, which, you know, like frosh event do we cancel, like all these like things that happen. But I think that is part of it. Just like a lot of candidates maybe seeming like similar to one another, or just like students have heard the same things again and again, or candidates like feel kind of similar to like a university administrator talking to you rather than like a friend who cares about issues too. I mean, I haven't looked at these candidates specifically, but I feel like authenticity and, like you say, and people who you can relate to as a student and not just to like someone who's like, you know, signed up to like lead an organization is something that would like help turn out and help people care more.
Absolutely. So for you, I'm interested. You obviously, we talked about getting an early start to your career while you're still in university, which is something that not a lot of students do or even can do. It's not an easy thing to kind of get that thing started while focusing and maintaining your studies, right? So that's awesome. But for you, do you think that further down the line in the future, are you purely just interested on reporting and being a journalist and telling the story and telling the truth and getting the facts? Or is there a part of you that's like if I was running for UTSU, maybe I could do something cool? Like, is there any part of you that would be like interested in politics perhaps one day?
Yeah, I feel like I would never fully make the switch to like that kind of thing. But I think in journalism, it's interesting. I think we see like a wider trend of people being interested in journalists who like aren't afraid to kind of insert what their thoughts might be on a topic too.
Right.
Like they can uncover information, interview other people, that kind of thing, but they don't have to act like a robot who automatically doesn't have any view or any background that would influence how they feel.
Right.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting trend. I don't know how much you follow the news or any like reporters or anything, but like I feel like people want to relate more to like a journalist as like a person and not just like the institution that they work for.
Absolutely.
I think it does make things a lot more trustworthy when you can have like that kind of like one-on-one like viewing of them and like contact.
100%. Absolutely. And I agree, because I've heard the same thing where, like you said, the shift in the culture of journalism, people want to hear what you think about it so that they know that, you know, there's at least a lens that they can look at your reporting on. Obviously, everyone wants to be as objective as possible, but you can't, like, everyone has some sort of agenda, right? And the ideal is that no matter what your opinion is, you're still going to try to report the truth as honestly as you can. But I think it makes people feel a little bit safer when you say, this is what my thoughts are on it. I'm still going to tell you exactly the truth of what happened. I'm not lying to you, but just so that you know where my analysis is coming from. It's coming from this side or up here, this angle. And you can kind of look at my, like, obviously take the facts for the facts, but then look at my analysis or my review on whatever we're talking about through that lens. I don't want to try to dupe you. I don't want to pretend to be a part of whatever cause that you care so deeply about, because that would be dishonest. And this is what I care about. You can be okay with that. You can disagree with me. That's fine. But at least you know where to look at what I'm saying from.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I feel like there's always going to be space for like a variety of those things. Like people might just want like, someone sharing their opinion in a video. And I feel like there's also always going to be space for some like super hard news reporting, like, a CP24 story about like a plane crashing or something. Sometimes you kind of like, I don't care what that person is or what their view is. I just want to know what happens. I think for broader issues, it's interesting how just like for so long it's just been so impersonal journalism, and it almost makes it just so like rigid and a little bit boring. And I don't think that's a bad thing if someone can just kind of be more like holistic with how like they're honest about how they view some topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So for you, like you said that you haven't done too much in terms of opinion pieces, right?
Yeah.
You tried to stay a little bit more objective and straight to the facts, but is there an angle, or is there ever a time where you approach it in a way where I want to share some thoughts, and like how do you go about that? Like how can you once again maintain the trust of your audience while saying, or even like the likability, because a lot of people right now are very, I'd say we're in a very politically sensitive era. So you don't want to necessarily put your opinion in and then completely lose one side of your audience, even though if they disagree with you, that's something that you have to deal with. How do you maneuver trying to integrate some opinion into your reporting?
Like, I feel like I haven't had experience with that just because I have stuck to news reporting through almost all of my like student journalism career. But I think it's interesting in like multimedia journalism, like you as like a podcaster, like you're sticking to facts with talking to like the people you interview, wanting to know what their views are. But then when you're like responding with a question or like responding with, your own views, like you kind of inevitably have to insert a little bit of the part of yourself there. And
100%.
I feel like I get that more and more when I'm watching like journalism through like TikTok, like people making videos or like people making a documentary or something. Like I think it's kind of inevitable that people have some kind of an angle, like even if it's just like this topic is serious or this topic is bad, that always does come through. So I haven't come to a resolution for myself for that yet, but I think it's like an interesting trend we're seeing kind of broadly. It's also interesting to see, like, at least in U of T, just I feel like a lot of opinions about people have about the school and stuff is also coming through in like opinions a lot of the time. Like, I don't know how much you're familiar with like activist accounts online at U of T that are like that uncover information about like student unions and that kind of thing. But there's like one account at UTM called like Transparency UTMSU, and it's like an account that tries to uncover like corruption at that student union and that kind of thing. And like obviously it's like kind of an activist vibe, but it's also informing people at the same time. So it kind of calls into question, like, do we need like an objective journalist intermediary for this information, or can it just go directly from like people with opinions to like the audience themselves now that we have social media?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. There was, oh yeah, this is a question I had. Let me rephrase that. First two words I'm rephrasing. How do you build trustworthiness or credibility with your audience? Because I imagine as part of the varsity, there are going to be students who they don't look at Maeve Ellis or like, I don't care whatever Maeve Ellis is saying because she's a part of the varsity, and they link your reputation personally with perhaps the reputation they believe that the university has. So because the varsity is the University of Toronto, organization, then it kind of gets intermingled. How would you respond to that? Do you ever feel that, people don't take Maeve Ellis for Maeve Ellis and perhaps combine your reputation with, who knows, maybe other journalists at the varsity because they see it as one paper, as one team, or as with the University of Toronto because it's an official club, like this kind of thing?
Like one thing I do, and something I recommend to like other student reporters I meet, is I try to have like as much one-on-one communication with like my audience as possible. So I'm like a huge fan of r/UofT because I get to like post my articles on there, and then when people like critique me or like, like say they hate my work or whatever, like I get to respond as Maeve Ellis, like with my personal account as a reporter myself. And and instead of, being kind of like high-minded and doing it as like an organization, as like an official statement from them, I think it could be a lot more effective just being a human being and just being like, hey, like I'm a fourth-year student. Yeah, I wrote this over a couple months. Let me know what you think. I think that can help with the credibility. And it's just like a lot more fun too, just like getting to kind of like step off whatever pedestal and just like talk directly as like someone who uncovered that information. And it was really fun with that like course evaluation article, because like there was all these computer sciencey people in the comment section being like, oh wait, I also web scraped and I got this results, or like, oh, what was your process there? So just like that kind of information. And it's also fun when you post a video on like Instagram or TikTok where I'm talking about my work, and I get to like, sometimes I'll even respond to a comment from like my personal Instagram account or like my personal TikTok too, just to be like as direct as possible with them.
100%.
Yeah.
And it definitely, that works. That humanizes you, because when people see an article that's on this big website or whatever, it looks very official and it looks maybe perhaps a bit distant from them personally, they can leave a comment without feeling that there's going to be any ramification. But when you see the personal Instagram account of the author, they kind of snaps them out of it. Oh, this is a real person who's now contacting me, and we are in communication. It's no longer distant, because it happens the same here. People will say something bad, and then the example I had, I posted a clip about, I forget I think it was like, it must have been about changing a tire. I was talking with my brother, and we were saying how, you should learn how to change a tire as a man, because if you're ever in a situation on the highway where you break down and your girlfriend has to change her own tire, it's going to feel very emasculating for you. This is what we were talking about. And there was a girl who was upset by this, of course, because, women can do what men can do and all this type of thing, and thought that my point, or at least what my brother and I were talking about, was a little bit disrespectful towards women's capabilities. And obviously that's not what I was trying to do. I was basically just saying that you should be able to do it for your wife. It's fine if she knows how to do it, but if it's cold, if it's dirty, you want to be able to put yourself in harm's way to make sure that she is happier or in a better state of mind, whatever. That was my overall point. But this girl had a problem with it, left a comment, whatever she said. So I messaged her directly, just DM. And that's like a little bit straight, but it's like, I think it gets to the point, because like you can actually see I'm a real human. And I messaged her and I sent her a voice note and I explained myself. I was very kind, very respectful. And then she was like overly apologetic. She's I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be mean, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Like, I completely respect your opinion. I understand where you're coming from. This is what I meant. And then it just gets you on the same level, because we're all students. Once again, you could have a class with this person that you're talking nasty about because they wrote some article, and hear them out. Maybe they actually have a good point that you didn't consider. So I think, once again, personal relationships like that and being able to discuss on a forum where there's no intermediary is very, very valuable.
Yeah, and it's interesting too online with like some platforms being anonymous and others not. Like, it's a really weird dynamic on Reddit, one that I'm still not used to, where it's like I'm like the only non-anonymous account. Like my Reddit account says Maeve Ellis on it, like Maeve Ellis, Toronto journalist, and like links to all my other accounts. And then, but I'm just like surrounded by all these like crazy usernames that'll be like, oh, this is horrible or whatever, just like these criticisms. And like it's fine, and I'm kind of used to it, but I feel like they're allowed to be a little bit mean just because it's not attached to like. You know, when you Google their name or whatever, but I totally agree with what you're saying with like, when you're there as a human being, like people are a lot more, it you know, it humanizes you, of course. And like, it's just like a much more productive conversation when you can kind of have it one-on-one and just kind of know them as like, not just like pixels on a screen or just like content to be reacted to, but you know, actually a person who's like come forth with that opinion or the article that they're sharing.
Absolutely. And that's why, once again, that's why I'm grateful that you're doing this right now. And for all the guests that come on this podcast, because not only is their name out there, but their face is out there. They're not like, well, except for the one guy, we had the UofT's admin who came on and did an episode with a ski mask, but everyone else has come on and showed their face and their identity, and they're saying what they think without hiding behind the screen. That's something I think that has been a big problem over the years with social media, is that people are being very comfortable saying things without any personal ramifications, without, you know, knowing or believing that there's going to be any backlash for anything they say or that's going to personally affect them. Whereas on this podcast, like, it can be a very minor thing, especially with clips. Like, I never intentionally try to like make somebody sound bad or like look bad through a clip, but you know, sometimes when you're editing something, it's a 1 hour interview, a 30-second clip can be easily taken out of context. Even if I'm not trying to do it, someone else might like see it in a different way. So you're taking a risk. People take a personal risk when they come on and do something like this and put their face out there, but it's something that I think we need a lot more of, and I respect it a ton, because like you said earlier, I only can take your opinion seriously, or at least I will hold it at a much higher credibility rank if you're willing to associate yourself with that idea. If the idea is so outlandish that you're not even willing to say, I, Carter Ponce, believe in this, then why should anyone else believe in it? You know what I mean?
I just want to ask, do you ever get nervous as like someone who's like so earlier in their career, or just like a young person, like having your face associated with like so many interview guests with like so many opinions? Like as a podcaster.
So sorry. Okay. So originally I thought you were going to say early in my career for things I've said, but you're saying particularly.
Oh, no, just as like a university aged person, like having this podcast, having this all out there. Like, do you ever think, oh, how will this affect my career like 10 years in the future?
Talking with other people who perhaps have some crazier thoughts?
Yeah. That's
a good question. And no, I don't think so at all. Because I didn't say those things. That's not me. And I think that there's no inappropriate discussion. I think that a conversation is always, you know, within the realm of reason. I don't think, like, there's a lot of, this is political, but like there's a lot of people who believe that the U.S. shouldn't negotiate with Putin, or that Trump shouldn't negotiate with Putin because whatever, he's a tyrant, blah, blah, blah. I think a conversation is always useful. I think it's never a bad thing to want to talk to someone and hear their opinion on anything. So I'm not worried about that in that sense. But yeah, like, you never know. I know that, like, I can already say now, I've said some things on this podcast that now I would probably disagree with. And that's just life. Like, I don't think that will necessarily come back to bite me, because if it does, for example, I can just say, I believe that then. I genuinely believe that then. My opinion's changed on it, and I'm a different person now. So that's how I approach it now. Has that ever happened with you? Like, oh, well, you don't necessarily do opinion as much. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Just like looking back on a piece of work and thinking, I wish I didn't publish that.
That makes sense. I feel like I've gotten that like on like Twitter or like different like social media accounts, or even just like, oh my God, that's cringy, or like, but it's so hard with social media, with it being like, you know, ingrained for eternity. Like it really is there, especially I feel like social media, things that you can like easily search for, like Twitter and Reddit. And like, you know, we all know there's like strains of articles that's like, this person had this opinion like many years ago. And like, sometimes it's like very valid, and like, it's a horrible thing to say, but yeah, I guess you do have to be careful. Like, even, you know, if it's something that seems innocuous, like it could come up in the future. Yeah, I forgot what I was saying, but like, yeah, I feel like it's also hard because like, you know, as a journalist or as someone working in like, you know, media like you, like, you know, it's our jobs to come up with like new information and new outlooks and new people to interview. But then it's just like such a tightrope to walk. Like you don't want to accidentally say something really dumb or you know, have something that comes back to bite you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that has helped me is that I think I was able to fully put myself out there once I felt that the path I wanted to go down was one of self-employment. So I like to, you know, people sometimes compliment me. I say sometimes, it doesn't happen regularly. I'm not trying to hype myself up, but people sometimes will say, you know, I like the fact that you are confident enough to say certain things that, you know, I do believe in, but the cancel culture or blah, 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 I don't want my name associated with that because of all the backlash or future career prospects, whatever. Now, once again, I appreciate those compliments, but I think I have been able to do that just because I don't really feel the same threat from losing career prospects because I'm not looking to necessarily build some sort of long corporate career looking for hire from other people. Like I have entrenched myself deep enough now to think that I am going to work for myself and I can provide myself with opportunities, and I don't need, you know, I don't need the words that I say here aren't going to prevent me from opportunities down the line. I really think that I'll be able to find work for myself. So that's what's been good for me, to be able to just not worry about that part.
That makes sense. And I feel like some career paths, it's just like, it must be so scary and just like, it's so specific, like academia, like you need references from professors and you need, to be on the good side of whatever like institution you're applying to. And I know at least a couple of my articles have been very pointed at different like research groups or whatever at U of T. Like one of them was, I think the School of Cities at U of T, and they had, like they were appointing someone to look at like affordable housing, and they appointed this politician who's like works for a corporate landlord that's like has like a rent strike against it. And so just like publishing stuff like that. And I know I would never get hired by the university for anything as well. So it's interesting. Like different students just like will, you know, message me after an interview being scared all of a sudden, oh, I said this, can you take that out? And a lot of the time it is just like really tied to whatever career they're applying to multiple years in the future. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. And another part of that too is that you saying like sometimes for academia you need references from professors. I think that like, of course, I've had guests on here because once again, a big part of VoV is platforming all the students. I don't want to discriminate against whoever can come on here. If you have an opinion you want to share, there's a seat for you here. I'm not, even if I disagree with it, because I've had people that I disagree with, obviously. You have 96, 97 episodes in, you're not going to agree with everybody there. And I think that's the main point of what this podcast is. But you'd be surprised how even if you, let's say, are willing to platform someone who you disagree with or who has opinions that you think are inappropriate, if you as the host do it in a respectful enough way, and you're not like, I don't know, you're not going out of your way to be hateful, because hateful is a word that's I think it's kind of overused because people tie hateful intention to just a lot of people's opinions. Like I definitely have opinions that are perhaps harsh, but in no sense hateful. And I can say that because I truly know it in my heart that I have no hate for the things or for the ideas that I'm against, let's say. But I think you'd be surprised that even if you have certain opinions that are perhaps a little bit off limits, if you approach it in a very respectful way and people can tell that you're being genuine and you're not trying to hurt anybody, that I don't think you'll lose out on as many opportunities as you think. Like I had a podcast with a professor and he was wanting to come on, and I did the podcast with the president, and that was her asking me to come on. I didn't invite her. She's like, can I do this podcast? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Because I think I've been professional enough to not be a jackass on here and say things in a way that is disrespectful. Even if they're harsh, even if they're, you know, a little bit touchy, I don't do it in a way that's rude or demeaning. So I think that's the main thing.
I don't know if you're public about this yet or not, but like, I'm just wondering, after you graduate here, are you going to continue with VoV or like do a different podcast where you're not, you won't be interviewing students, but just like,
I won't be interviewing students. Yeah. I'm in the midst of figuring that out.
That's so cool.
I believe that you're episode 97. So
okay.
Episode I think like the last episode of April is like 103 or 104 or something, and then I'll be moved out of the city. But we're in the midst of figuring that out. So
okay, yeah.
Do you have any suggestions? What do you think we should do?
That's so hard. I feel like we have a lack of I feel like we have a lack of like podcasts / like really independent media companies in Canada. So I'm excited to see what you do. But yeah, I guess I think it's cool what you're doing, interviewing like everyday people. So it'd be cool to see if you wanted to continue that with just like random Torontonians or random people in like whatever area you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that would be fun. And I feel like once I leave, I feel like someone should take up a new version of VoV, because then where's the independent student podcast for University of Toronto going to be, right? Mm-hmm. Like, say if when I leave, anybody can be the next VoV, because I think that this is extremely valuable for a college staff or university to have, because it can sometimes feel a little bit isolating when you have certain beliefs or you feel the culture is a certain way and nobody else around you maybe agrees with you, or the people that do are anonymous on Reddit and you're like, are these people even real? So I think that, if there was a platform where, you're able to see the culture in its most real form and I think that not to hype up VoV, but no. I think that it's the most real when there's no restrictions and people are putting their face and name out there. Because like with student levies, like I know a lot of the Victoria College clubs, like they have some restrictions if you want funding, which like understandable, makes sense. If you're going to get student fees, you obviously need to follow some guidelines, but then it doesn't let students, be their truest self if they want to be a part of some of these organizations. But then the other way is like you're being a little bit too unaccountable if you're on Reddit with no username,
Yeah.
So I think a balance is what you want there, but that's life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it's great been working for student newspapers and stuff, but like obviously when you're in an organization of like 50-ish people, there's a lot more bureaucracy to navigate and no weird like limitations per se, but just like there's always going to be extra steps. And I think it's cool we're at a place now where someone can just like set up their own cameras and microphones and just like have an independent thing.
Would you want to start that once you graduate? Would you want to have your own independent platform to speak on?
I was thinking of that actually, and like for this summer I was even thinking of keeping it like very intentionally open, just to like do my own independent thing. Like it might be like an investigative project or just like some kind of I honestly don't even know what. Like I think podcasts are cool, but just any form of journalism. Because like a lot of the time in journalism we're just thinking about like, oh, I got a byline in this outlet, or oh, I spent a summer working for here. But if audiences are turning just to connecting to people, like journalists as people, I think you do have to think too, like, well, I should just like do something independent at a certain point as well.
Absolutely. I think the reason that you'd be good at that is because you actually care. So what do you what got you into journalism in the first place? Like what sparked the interest? I think
it is just in general a good way of making a positive difference. And I think when I was a kid in school, I was always interested in the kinds of projects where you would like research a topic and present it to people or like make a project about it rather than like, writing a big boring essay about it instead. So the fact that you just like study a topic really hard, just like latch onto it and then teach other people about it, I feel like that's like kind of skills I always enjoyed doing. And in general, I just find it so rewarding, just like uncovering information that like makes a positive difference in people's lives, that teaches them about an issue they didn't know about before, that makes them mindful to what some other people are going through. And I'm really happy I chose this career path. I've wanted to do it since I was like in middle school pretty much.
That's awesome. That's sweet. A lot of people not a lot of people get to say that they get to live their dream from that long ago. So that's awesome. I want to talk about, I said I was going to talk about it earlier, but that paper you wrote on the UofT merchandise production, if you're willing to talk about that, because how did you even receive this finalist nomination for this award? It's once again, to reiterate, the Canadian University Press's 2023 Investigative Journalism Award.
I was nominated for it, and I think I think it's just the student newspaper just like puts forward people's articles to it. Like, I don't think there's like a too interesting way for that. Yeah. But yeah, that was really rewarding to get that recognition just because it was something I worked on for like months and months. Yeah. And it got like some, like I think around like 3,000-ish people read it, and it got some attention on like Reddit and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it was really validating to be able to like go to a conference, talk to other student journalists about it, and like go from there.
100%.
Yeah, it was a fun article to write. U of T has like guidelines for like the factories making its merchandise and that kind of thing, and I basically uncovered that like a lot of those guidelines, like they're not actually being followed, right. And U of T is like very secretive about a lot of steps in the process, like. For one example, like it says that workers need to be able to unionize, like join independent unions. But I went to the U of T bookstore and I like took pictures of all the labels on the clothing, and a huge portion of the clothing is made in like China and Vietnam, which are countries that there is no independent unionization in the first place, and that kind of thing.
So when you're writing these articles, you say it took you months to write that one, or you spent a lot of time with it. Yeah. What are the highs and lows of kind of putting a project together like that? Like what challenges do you face? What are the moments where you're like really in love with the work you're doing? Like walk me through that process, because there's always going to be that up and down.
Yeah, it's definitely such a roller coaster, and I feel like, I don't know how it is for other journalists, but I definitely get so much self-doubt, like at random points in an article where I'm like, okay, this topic's actually super boring, or like, oh my God, I found nothing here, or like, oh my God, there's actually no issue at all in the first place, that kind of thing. So I think it's important to be confident in yourself, like confident in your gut. Like if you think there is something going on here, like keep on pursuing it. And I think when I do actually uncover cool information, like I do get, a freedom of information request in internal documents, or like a great interview subject, it's just like, it's really like a sense of euphoria that like I don't really get from anywhere else. So so it's a lot of fun having these kinds of projects I can do, that a lot of the time I'm just like so much more passionate about than like schoolwork or like something I'm doing for a class. So it's really made my university career just like having something to do outside of classes that I really enjoy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And do you ever think, like you say that's actually a good point, because it happens with with scientific studies too. We always get warned about this in psychology classes, because I take a psychology minor as well. And it's that someone will embark on a study, on a journey of trying to uncover perhaps a certain truth in psychology. They have a thesis, they put forward the thesis, they start to look at the data, they start to get, some results, some evidence in, and it doesn't align at all with what their thesis was.
Right, yeah.
And maybe it'll align a little bit, and then they try to push it forward or try to exaggerate it because they really want their thesis to be proven right. Do you think that ever happens perhaps in journalism, where someone has an idea and they're like, I want to find the evidence, I want to prove this to be true, and this is maybe less the case for you because, like you said, you're less opinionated, you're more just about uncovering what's going on, but maybe you thought something was happening at the university, tried to find evidence, and there was just nothing, and you're just like, damn, I guess there's nothing here. How hard is it to, like, I don't want to say give up on an idea, but have you ever had experience with maybe other journalists who maybe try to force a headline or force a story that there isn't really any substance there because they don't want to let go of it?
Yeah, I think it can be really sad if you're like working on a project for a while and you have an idea that something's wrong, and then it ends up like maybe not being an issue or just like a little bit more neutral or something like that. I think like another version of it is just when you're working hard on an article and like you need some kind of information to kind of study what you want to study, and you're just like not able to get that ultimately. And it can be kind of sad to throw away a bunch of work, or also like when you know something's true, like you just like, but it's just like it's hard to prove it like to your editor or to your audience. You've witnessed something in real life, or you just like know it from talking to people off the record, but you just like can't get to the final step of like getting something in writing to prove it. So it can be frustrating, and it also calls into question like, journalism now, it's all like traditionally it's all been about just like sending out the final product, like this final piece of writing, the final video cut, whatever. But I think we have the opportunity now with social media to share a lot more like behind the scenes of the process, why we made certain decisions, what did we think was happening that didn't end up happening, and that kind of thing. So I tried to do that with my like course evals article, for instance, where I I would talk in the comment section where I was like, they would be like, oh, is this true? And I'd be like, oh, I thought that was true for a while, but then I got these numbers back and it shows like that. Or like, oh, they'd be like, is this true? And I'd be like, oh, it's only true for that percentage of the time, so I'm not really sure.
Right.
So yeah, just being like a lot more, like knowing that it's really just like a spectrum, like how much, like how much you want to share with people, and just like what, like sharing the journey itself instead of just like that final polished product of your journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask really shortly, we're going to take another short break for the cameras, but I want to know a little bit about the step-by-step process of like having an idea and then starting to work on the article and then getting it published. I don't know how long that process is. Maybe it varies depending on the article you're doing, obviously, but for first-year students or incoming students or just anyone that wants to get into journalism, for example, maybe wants to work at the Varsity, maybe you can tell them a bit of, like you said, the behind the scenes of what goes on. How do you get an article from basically the idea to the final publishing? But I should fix the cameras because I don't want you talking to nobody. So we'll be right back.
I think you're really good at like the editing on like reels. I don't know if you're on TikTok too, but just like the zooming in and out and stuff. Like, yeah. Is that something you have to like learn?
I mean, just obviously learn from experience. Not that I want to admit my, thorough experience with watching reels all the time, but you just see other podcasts do it, and I just use CapCut. I don't know if you know CapCut Pro. It's just on the phone. It's pretty easy to use. So, that's about it. But yeah, thank you.
Makes sense.
Those take a decent amount of time to edit. So right now, we haven't been posting as much, but yeah, it's a process. I don't know. It's fun though. I like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, back from a break again. What were we talking about, Maeve? I don't remember.
Journalistic process, I think.
Yes, the step-by-step. Thank you. We're talking throughout the break. Sometimes throughout the break, we'll I'll go use the washroom or whatever, but we kept the conversation going. We're talking about the step-by-step. So yes, please walk me through it for a future journalist, a young journalist who wants to, maybe be in your position one day. How would you describe the experience of getting an article from open to close?
Yeah, I think it's really important to actually start on a topic that you have genuine interest in and that you think other people will find interesting too, rather than a piece that's just covering an event just for the sake of covering it, just for the sake of practice or something like that. Think about is there some kind of topic that my friends are talking about in the dining hall, or that my professor's griping about at the beginning of class, and then I think it makes you a lot more motivated to track down interview sources and do whatever else you want to do to get that information. As for actually being a student journalist on campus, I think a really basic way we all start out is just talking to random people, doing a voice memo on your phone and, transcribing it and just compiling just what are people's views on this current topic. I think my very first article on U of T, it was people complaining about how a lot of classes were getting switched to being online last minute. So they would be like, oh, I traveled across the world to come to Toronto. Now all my classes are online, and that kind of thing. And a lot of that is you're supposed to just mainly interview people who aren't your friends, but I was a total novice. So I just talked to people in my dorm and in dining hall and stuff like that. And and as you get, more advanced with that kind of thing, you can start going to events attending protests, talking to people there, going to student council meetings, U of T governance meetings, trying to get internal documentation on stuff, such as just or not internal, but just going on websites, getting kind of specific numbers, that kind of thing. And then once you get more you've been doing it for a few years, I've been trying to experiment with other methods doing Python web scraping to get that data on course evaluations, or doing freedom of information requests, which is a legal technique to get internal information from a source. So I think just finding topics you're interested about and then just using every method you can think of to learn more about it.
There you go. So ladies and gentlemen, if you need to get an article started and closed and finished and read by thousands of people, listen to this process. That's awesome. Yeah. So I didn't even think about that. Yeah. The online courses situation, that was a mess. How did you feel about COVID at U of T?
I think I really tried to have as much in-person courses as I could, because I think we're the same year, and it was just coming out of Ontario high school. It was just almost totally online for me for the second half of grade 11, and then mostly online for grade 12. And yeah, I just felt like I just really had trouble like focusing on stuff or like really, socializing or enjoying my time. So I definitely prioritized, like, I would like switch out of a class entirely. If there was a chance, it would be like hybrid.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about yourself?
It was, I remember, like, obviously there was in-person classes, but there was like on and off times where like everyone was online, where they just had to make it online, where they're like maybe the class size was way too big. Like if you have a capacity of 300, then maybe it's a little bit, less ideal to have that many students in a classroom. But I know for me, it started, a lot of them were online, but I'm super grateful. Like, I feel like it's funny how fast people forget how, awesome it is to have in-person classes. At least for me, like a lot of the people in COVID, everyone was saying how much they missed in-person classes and how online wasn't as good, or it was harder to learn. And now it's just like, oh, I gotta go to class, I gotta wake up, blah, blah, blah. But it's like not too long ago, a few years ago, we were all like waiting to get back. So no, I'm grateful we're back. It was COVID was tough, but that's life. Everyone had to go through it. So it was an interesting experience, because first year should be a pretty transformative year, I would say. Obviously going from high school to university is a big deal, and it was for me, I would say that still. But like the fact that the teaching style was very much so similar, because you go from COVID year in grade 12 to COVID year in first year university. It's like everything's still on the computer. How much of the university experience are you really getting? How much are you really able to grow? But I don't think it lasted the entire time. So I think it was still a decent experience. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of people who started school in, I think, like fall 2020, they like ended up taking a gap year instead, just because they were like, I don't want to move or do all this stuff just to be totally online. 100%. And I was thinking of doing a gap year after high school, but I specifically wanted to do university just to like have like in-person school again. Like I just miss like going to classes, seeing people. And I felt like even like online grade 11 and 12 was like, that was almost like a mini break or a mini gap year of like not seeing people my age.
100%. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, not on the podcast yet, but you talked about how after first year, so after that first COVID year, obviously you did some traveling and you kind of got to see a little bit of the world in that way. And I think that was another good opportunity for growth. Is that something that you kind of value or look back on, that your experience kind of touring the world?
Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, you've talked, I think, on other podcast episodes of like the importance of traveling and everything like that. But I did a summer of like hitchhiking and just like traveling across Europe, which was so much fun. And I think I just really recommend those like in-person experiences of just doing something totally apart from like schoolwork or apart from like internships for a job. And it can just like cause you to grow so much as a person. And I think I'm trying to value that a lot more, just like experiences in my life. And like, they say online, like doing stuff like for the plot, like just like saying yes to opportunities, saying yes to random things. And like it's just, I feel like it forges so many better memories in your life doing stuff like that, rather than watching a show or just doing something on your phone or talking about someone else doing something.
Absolutely. What do you think specifically about it was able to help you grow? Like, was it the novelty? Was it like a change in perspective from seeing different parts of the world? Like, what specifically about traveling?
I think something that was cool was like connecting with people who were like not only my age, but also like a few years older. Like, I feel like as university students, we're so or like less in university, but for so much of our lives, we're segmented into people who are like the same age as us, like the same year as us, or the same like few years as us. And so, and it's almost just like so intimidating and far off people who are like, 22 or 26 who have graduated and have started working. So I think connecting with people like a bit older in environments that are like outside of your school, it can make it like a lot less scary to look off into the future and things like that. And just in general, like traveling and learning, I feel like it's just like experiences you just get so much out of.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. This has been a pretty awesome conversation, Maeve. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign out for the people listening at home?
No, it's been great talking to you. And I encourage like other people at U of T, if you're interested in topics that affect students, if you're interested in learning more about the school, you should try out journalism, try out an independent media thing, try to get involved in student politics. I think it adds a lot more to your university years.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can expand the the opportunity. And even if it's work, like this thing, people see journalism and be like, oh, it's work, but it's like, it is a blend of work and life too. Like I've been told the criticism where it's like, you need to really take in the university experience while you're always doing the podcast, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this is an experience in itself. This is a very unique experience. I'm sure for you, you can definitely say that if you hadn't, joined the varsity, or if you hadn't really gone down this path of journalism, which is considered more, people would consider it work instead of actually, living it up and having new experiences. I'm sure you can still say, despite it being work, that it has opened up a ton of experiences for you.
Yeah, especially meeting people too. Like if I go through like my Instagram following, it's like all like student journalism people or people I met at protests or like student councils and that kind of thing. So yeah, I feel like it, it's like work, but like what we do, it's also just meeting people and talking to people. And that's a lot of how you experience university too.
Absolutely. 100%. So ladies and gentlemen, that is Maeve Ellis. You can go read her work at the Varsity. She's done some articles with the Strand as well. And I appreciate your time for coming on. We will see you next Sunday. You can follow us on Instagram @Voices of Vic. Peace out.